وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُّدَّكِرٍ.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Today we're going to be talking about how to memorize half a page of the Quran or maybe a full page of the Quran every day. And I have Malam Sadiq with me. Assalamu alaikum, Malam.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much.
So I think we should just delve straight into the topic. How can someone who wants to memorize half a page or one page of the Quran daily achieve this? Do you have a best practice that you believe works well, or perhaps something that has proven effective for you and perhaps your students that you would like to share?
Thank you very much for that question. Alright, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa jami'a man wala. First and foremost, I would like to tell whoever wants to memorize the Quran that the Quran is the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whatever you have to do with the book of Allah, you have to do with a pure and sincere intention. Because intention really matters when it comes to your deed in Islam. So since it is a book of Allah, and then you want to memorize it perfectly, then your intention matters a lot. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Qamar, He said, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. And indeed, we have made the Quran easy for remembrance. Is there who want to try to remember? So, which means you need to try to remember before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make it easy for you. So, and it all starts from you having a sincere intention. What are you memorizing the Quran for? Are you memorizing it to impress people? Are you memorizing it to perfect yourself in Islam? Are you memorizing it for the sake of Allah? Are you memorizing it to protect Islam as a religion? So you need to ask yourself those questions. So it is the answer that will determine if you are memorizing the Quran with the sincere and pure intention. So having established the fact that intention is key and fundamental in memorizing the Quran, then you need to now sit down and then think of what method works for yourself, because we're different. I might prescribe a method that works for me or works for the student that I teach, and it might not work for someone else. So it depends on whoever you are, the kind of environment you stay, whoever your teacher is. All of those things will determine the way it's going to be easy for you to memorize the Quran. However, one of the things that I used to do is that, or that I used to tell people who are beginners to the Quran, is that it is compulsory that you have a teacher at first, because you cannot memorize the Quran alone. Even Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, although he was an ummi, he was unlettered, but then Allah Subhanahu wa Taala He sent Malak Jibril to him to teach him how to recite the Quran. So, which means you cannot memorize the Quran alone. That's another thing that you need to take note of. After you have accomplished that, then another thing that you need to do is sit down, recite the Quran, or the number of verses that you want to memorize. You recite them from the Quran. You recite them countless number of times. And after doing that, then you cannot start memorizing. So you start memorizing, you can take one verse, try to memorize it, close the Quran, you try to see if it has sticked up to your head. Then you open the Quran again, you take a new verse. After you've taken that new verse and you have seen that it has sticked on your head, so then you need to revise the first one that you memorized and add them together. So you don't just make them pile up. So you start step by step, step by step.
There's no one magic number that does it for you. You know, you hear some people say recite it 3 times, some would say recite it perhaps 5 times.
Oh, magic number. I really don't have a magic number. My ustad, most times, he's always saying we should recite 10 times. And then I felt like 10 times was working for me because I was still a beginner. But now there are some verses that I'll just take. I just need to recite them 3 to 5 times, then it has sticked. That's why I said earlier that it depends. It is subjective to individuals. It depends on what works for you. So if 10 is very, very good, I feel like 10 is very, very good for anybody. So if you have
Okay.
recited 10 times while you are fully concentrated, then it should stick. Except if it's a very long verse, then you can break it down.
Okay. Okay. I have another question, madam. If someone wants to memorize the Quran, should they first complete the recitation of the entire Quran before they can start memorizing? Or what's your take on this? Or can they just start memorizing if they are beginners? They can put the words together. Can they start memorizing a portion of the Quran then? What do you recommend?
All right. That question too is very, very important, and thank you very much for it. So the reason for learning how to recite the Quran first before memorizing the Quran, although in some madaris you can have children like they are in Tarbiyah, children that are in Hadana, like they are in elementary classes, so you can have them memorize little surah like Ikhlas, Nas, Falak. So that was just for them to know that, oh, I'm going to madrasa and I'm learning this surah. Most often than not, all of those children, they memorize the Quran not perfectly. You can just see them, they just recite it. It will not be a very, very perfect recitation of those surah. So it's just for them to memorize something. But that's not what we're going to. What we're going to is memorizing the Quran perfectly and reciting the Quran perfectly. So now, it is very necessary that one knows how to recite the Quran because it will help someone a lot in memorizing the Quran. So if you are the type that your recitation is still not fluent, it might, I'm not saying absolutely fluent. If it is still not fluent on a normal standard, it might be difficult for you to memorize the Quran because you would just have to sit with your malam or whoever is teaching you the Quran at the instance of the class. So, and when you recite it, you recite it into your back. So you memorizing the Quran is something you're going to do personally. You have to go and do it on your own. So if it is difficult for you to pronounce some words of the Quran, then memorizing it will be very, very difficult because all you're just going to take into your head is going to be Bawdadash and not the correct thing in the Quran. So hence the reason why it's not like it is compulsory that you complete reciting the Quran fully. So if you have substantially achieved a fluent recitation of the Quran, then it's not necessary that you complete recitation of the Quran before you start memorizing.
Okay, so fluency is key here for you to start
Yeah.
memorizing. Okay, so it brings me to my next question then. For someone who has completed or who has attained that level of fluency with reciting the Quran, is it better for them to start memorizing the small portion of the Quran first? Those are the small surahs first, or is it better to start memorizing from the larger surahs like Surah Al-Baqarah down? What do you recommend?
The way Madaris, like different madrasa of Tahfiz, the way they approach this, they approach it differently. Some of them memorize from Nas, then they move upward, and then some of them memorize from Baqarah and they move downward. But to me, the one I'm going to recommend is that I feel like someone who is new to something needs to start from the little part of it. So it's just like you wanting to mount a stairs. So if you want to mount a stair, then you would need to take the first step first. You don't go jumping into like the fourth or the fifth step. Or like even saying you want to start from the last step, the one that is up. So because if we look at the Surah Al-Baqarah, so Ali Imran, Surah Al-Nisa, most of the verses that are there, you hardly find a verse that is short there. So they contain long verses. So imagine someone that wants to start memorizing the Quran and then the first thing they start memorizing is a long verse. It will be overwhelming and it might be difficult in most cases for that kind of person. So my advice is that whoever wants to start memorizing the Quran should pick it from little. And then because you're picking it from little doesn't mean that you're not going to achieve whatever you're going to achieve. Yorubas, they used to say that any bad dagbe the summer, so, like to translate it in English, it means whoever aims to go to the sky and he mounts a mortar, then you have started this journey already. So, regardless of how little or how small the verses you're memorizing are, it doesn't mean you're not going to achieve your goal. So, I just feel like it's better to start from a little part than so then the more you go, the more you advance. So, the more you advance, the more verses you memorize.
So let's wrap up with this now. Although you touched on it briefly when we started, but I'm just going to, I would like us to reiterate. For one who wants to memorize the Quran, is it important for them to have a teacher? Because some people feel that, well, I know how to recite, so I should be able to memorize on my own. What's your take on this?
That's a very good question. A very thoughtful one too. Thank you very much. So, I mentioned it earlier in my first answer that I was given, or that I gave earlier today. That memorizing the Quran requires that you have a teacher, a personal teacher, in fact. Although you might have like many other teachers, but at least have someone that this is the person that's teaching me the Quran, teaching me how to recite the Quran. So more often than not, some persons think they know how to recite the Quran. Since they know how to recite the Quran fluently from the Quran, they believe that they should not face any difficulties in memorizing the Quran. I once tried that before I completed Ahqaf while I was in Najim. While I was in Najim, I was trying to memorize Juzu from Dhariyat to Najim. I was trying to memorize it, and so it's not that I had the problem of reciting the Quran. I can recite the Quran fluent from the Quran, but then I was trying to memorize it by myself. So anytime I want to do ada like for someone, because I have someone that I used to meet to help me check if I'm making mistake. I used to notice that I used to make a lot of mistakes because those mistakes is not I don't know how it just went unnoticed to me because I did not have a teacher to recite it to me at first. Even Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, although he is unlettered, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still sent Malak Jibril to him. Even after he had completed like recitation of the Quran, or maybe some of the verses that was revealed to him in piecemeal, he must have known them. But during Ramadan, Jibril will go to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he will recite the Quran to him from the beginning of the revelation to whatever they have stopped. So you need to have someone who would be like your teacher, who would guide you in memorizing the Quran, because the person would, apart from the fact that you might not, you would avoid some mistakes in your recitation. The person will advise you based on his experience that okay, this is the way to recite the Quran, this is the way it is being done, and so it is necessary to have a teacher while you recite, while memorizing the Quran.
Thank you very much, Madam Sadiq Adewumi. So we're going to just call it a wrap here. So we'll see you another time. Remember to comment, like, and share, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. So from myself now and Madam Sadiq, it's Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
ولقد يسرنا القرآن للذكر فهل من مدكر